welcome to the planning meeting on Wednesday the 17th of January 24. And so I'm going to go straight to item 1, which is apologies for absence. Councillor Eddie Peake's not here, and Councillor the Mayor, Guran, is substituting. Any other?
Councillor Lammas, Chairman, and I have no substitute. Thank you.
Okay, so he's not here at the moment. Okay. Is it agreed that I signed the minutes of the previous meeting? Thank you. I'm not aware of any urgent matters. Still none? Okay. Shall we move on to item 4, declarations of pecuniary and other interests? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. My usual declaration, which the clerk is fully aware of. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare an interest on item 7, and I'll be speaking as ward councillor. So the interest is I'm a parish councillor, and they've put in a representation to the application, but also as a ward member, we've also put in a representation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I refer anybody else? Sorry. No, can I refer you to the supplementary agenda advice sheet? Majority refers to said item that Councillor Pearce just mentioned, item 7, and him and his colleagues have sent in a representation which is attached to the back of the advice. There's also some further comments on it, but the other thing is that some comments on item 6, some alternative wording, I think. Right, so we move on to item 5, and that is the application at 48 Green Street, Gillingham, and Peter will speak to the item.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application site relates to 48 Green Street. It's the former Riley's Pool Hall in Gillingham. It's located just off Gillingham High Street. You can see on the location plan on the screen, the High Street, and then the site here outlined in red. It fronts Green Street with the post office delivery depot within that area as well, and immediately to the north is Motor Lane, and that bounds it on there, with to the east and southeast the railway line. The Pool Hall closed in 2016. With Riley's vacating in 2017, so it's been closed and vacant and not in any use for 7 years now. So you'll see from the photos, I think the external elevation is holding up quite well in terms of its finish, but from the internal photos here, you can see the state of disrepair that the building itself is falling into from those years of unuse, basically. And as I say, that's the interior of the building at the moment. In 2019, the Strategic Land Availability Assessment identified the site as potential for housing. This was again confirmed later in 2019 with the Gillingham Town Centre Master Plan that identified that looked to regenerate the town, or rejuvenate the town centre, and looked at this as a potential redevelopment site. The proposal in front of us today is for the park conversion and extension of the building to provide 57 flats, mix of predominantly 1 and 2 bedroom flats, with 1 studio flat and 1 3-bedroom flat across 6 stories. So you can see from the plans here in the cross-section how the current building steps down to the rear, and with the proposed elevations here, it essentially looks to square that building off with, again, a setback upper level to create the 6th story. The proposal would be essentially a car-free development. There would be no general car parking spaces. There would be 2 disabled spaces, which would be to the rear of the property, or of the building, sorry. But in this case, it is an extremely sustainable location. As I say, it's within a stone's throw of the high street and Gillingham railway station as well, to offer those different modes of transport and different amenities to access by foot. In terms of residential amenity, the existing residences around would be unaffected. There would be no significant harm created from the development, and the proposed future occupiers would all have adequate amenity in terms of space standards and light elements. You can see from the elevations here, you've got the articulation, including balconies and sort of quite large-scale windows to ensure that level of amenity is then provided. In terms of the affordable housing and Section 106 contributions, you'll see from the report that there's no affordable housing secured, and other than the bird mitigation fee, no proposed Section 106 contributions. The reason for that is because of the viability of the scheme and the conversion costs and the residual land value that would be achieved from the redevelopment means that the scheme with policy compliant affordable housing or contributions wouldn't be viable, and the development would not go ahead, so we'd be left with the empty building. This appraisal has been assessed by the council's appointed viability expert, who agrees with the conclusions in that regard. It's not one that we just accept the applicant's view. We do make sure that we appoint our own specialist in that regard, and that they sort of forensically go through that to ensure that they're satisfied with the conclusions. And as I say, in this case, they have come to the same conclusion. And I think from the report, you can see that in terms of the profit level for the developer, it's around 16.5%, which is lower than one would expect. Typically, in terms of a developer profit, you're looking at a 20% developer profit on schemes. And I would suggest that the risk involved in a project such as this, with the fact that the building has been vacant for a considerable time, is probably quite high. You're not developing a fresh greenfield site where everything's a known quantity. There are risks involved in this type of development, which is apparent by the fact that nothing's come forward in the last 7 years. So I think the conclusion on the viability is to my mind a reasonable one, and one that I would expect, to be honest. In addition to the proposals here, just again draw your attention, which obviously you're fully aware of, the housing land supply position that Medway's in, but in terms of the supplementary agenda, the updated supply figure was published last week, which has us sat at a 3.3-year housing land supply figure, obviously below the required 5 years. So that engages the tilted balance within the MPPF set out in paragraph 11, which basically says that you'll be looking at, you should be granting sustainable development, and unless there are policies within the framework overall that would outweigh that. This is an opportunity to permit 57 flats on previously developed land within a highly sustainable location. The MPPF again gives substantial weight to using brownfield land, previously developed land within settlements for the use of homes. That's set out in paragraph 124 of the MPPF. You can see, as I said, you can see from the internal photographs that the building is beginning to deteriorate. This is a suitable proposal to bring that building, which isn't without architectural merit. I think when you look at the front elevations, it's quite a brutalist architecture, but it's quite a feature within the street, and it would give that, give the opportunity to bring that back into a use which is beneficial to the area. And I think if I just finish off with some potential sketch views that they're looking at, the recommendation is that delegated powers be given to grant the application subject to the unilateral undertaking legal agreement for the bird mitigation fee. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Peter. I'm aware that this committee has not had an opportunity of having development viability and assessment training, which the previous committee did. We are scheduled to have a training session on the 12th of February, which is 2 days before the next planning meeting. I can ask Mr. Harris to talk about viability and what the training consists of.
Chairman, thank you very much. Can I firstly just say that, backing up what Peter said in relation to this site, the MPPF is clear. The application should be determined in accordance with the development plan. So irrespective of the 5-year housing land supply, the question is, does this proposal comply with the development plan, i.e. our existing local plan? The answer is absolutely yes, it does, for the reasons that Peter has explained. So even before you get to that presumption, it is in compliance with the development plan and the master plan. And indeed, I took a walk around Gillingham town centre with the portfolio holders some months ago, where we were looking at issues in Gillingham centre, and we got to Riley's, and the portfolio holders all asked me, when is this site going to come forward for development? So just wanted to back up the points that Peter was saying that. In relation to viability, I do understand, members, it's a complex issue. I'm sure you all appreciate that brownfield sites are far more expensive to develop than greenfield sites. I've never, ever had to do a viability assessment on a greenfield site. They're always viable. Brownfield sites, there are invariably, as Peter says, viability assessments. Now, some years ago, we used to use a number of firms for those viability assessments. And I was concerned that they always seemed to just accept what the applicant said. When I looked into this further, it seemed that those who were giving that advice to us and other local authorities also were doing work for developers, and therefore it was understandable that they were agreeing with the applicants. Not that they were necessarily doing anything wrong, but there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in viability assessments. So what I did then was to contact someone recommended by Vicky Nutley from the who are Chief Legal Officer, and she recommended someone that she'd dealt with out in Norfolk Way, who is a poacher cum gamekeeper and is exceptionally good at looking at viability assessments. Since we have been using him, he has challenged quite a number of viability assessments submitted to us, and we have got significantly more money coming in as a result of those. Peter has explained how he has been used on this one and the advice that he has given us on this case. Notwithstanding that, it is a bit of smoke and mirrors, viability. Martin did come in and do a presentation, as the chairman said, to members of the previous council, so about a year ago, and explained in quite simple terms what's required legally under a viability assessment and how he goes about those work, and also answers some quite detailed questions from members. Now, we have set up some training for you with him on the 12th of February, and that will help to demystify a lot of the issues for you. Hopefully that's helpful, Chairman.
Okay, so this is my suggestion with agreement to Mr. Harris is the fact that at the viability assessment training we have 48 Green Street as a case study. So Martin will be able to explain his work on that site. And then 2 days later we have a planning meeting. So what I'm suggesting is that with your consent, we defer this item until the next meeting on the 14th and be able to discuss it in greater detail, having had that viability training. Any member? Okay.
I'd like to second that proposal if it is a proposal, Councillor Hubbard.
Okay. Anybody else at all? Councillor Jones?
Chair, is simply to say I very much support that. This is a pretty new committee. A number of people are new to it, and I think, bearing in mind its quasi-judicial role, it would be good to get the viability training in before we consider this application further. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Galvin?
Thank you, Chair. I take it there's no problem with the application going out of time.
Chair, really good question. We have been in contact with the applicants to just to explain the possibility of a deferral tonight and the reasons for that. They're quite comfortable that a deferral to enable that training with their application being a case study will help in a more informed decision than at the next committee. So they're comfortable with the deferral.
Just Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not in relation to your proposal, it's in relation to something else. I have no doubt many members here have come across instances of where tenants, especially in flats, complain about damp and mould within their flats, primarily caused because they've got nowhere to dry their washing. They're drying their washing inside the flat in a tumble dryer. So I'd like to see something, if this is being deferred, for also the proposal to include something in regards of how the tenants are going to dry their washing to stop this problem from happening.
Thank you. Councillor Field?
Yeah, if we're going to defer, the other thing I noted that was EDF did not respond to this consultation. I'm not sure whether it's worth chasing them about that. I have concerns, obviously, that this is a large number of flats and potentially, given low car, that people might be using more e-scooters and e-bikes and charging those facilities, and we are aware that there have been a number of fires involved in those type of charges. So I just want to get some reassurance to see if EDF are fine with that. There's extra time.
Okay. If you take this on, Peter, to...
Yeah, we can follow up with EDF and ensure we get a response for the next committee. And I think picking up on Councillor Etheridge's point as well, I think the fact that the training was relatively soon after this committee, I think was why the applicant was a bit more comfortable in that regard, because obviously the risk general risk of deferrals from committees is that there are contractual obligations, and we may find ourselves with an appeal against non-determination. But I think when we're looking at a deferral for a single committee cycle due to the training that's already set up, that was why the applicant was comfortable with that arrangement. Thank you.
Yeah, because this is the first application that we have had need viability assessment is actually integral to the actual application. Any other member? Oh, Councillor Hamadeshi.
No, thank you. My question is to do with the parking situation, and I do recognise and welcome the sustainability aspect of it, but the fact that you've offered, I think, 2 disabled bays, is there a ratio of disabled bays you need to be put into a new build complex? Because the research I've done, correct me if I'm wrong, is 6% would be the adequate amount freed up for disabled people.
I think that's to do with the building regs and their sort of allowances as well. And I think so I disappeared. There is a relaxation on the requirements when you're looking at a conversion, because clearly if you're converting an existing building, you'd have seen from the site that there isn't a curtilage with the building, so there is no place that they can provide any car parking. So the only way of having car parking on the site is if you demolish the whole building completely and start again with a different proposal. And obviously that's very different, one from a cost point of view, but also from a sustainability point of view of the waste that you have to get rid of with the demolition of the existing building, and the embedded carbon that's within that construction, which you'll lose. So there's that trade-off element. So I think I take the point that it is a big consideration. I used to live not too far from the property in one of the terraced houses, which was, again, obviously without off-street car parking. So it is an area which is quite congested in terms of on-street car parking. But I think you'd be looking as an occupant, you would buy this or rent one of these flats knowing the situation and knowing that because of the site and the fact that there is no car parking, then you'd be buying it with that in mind. Oh, and just to pick up on the point on the washing element, then yeah, we'll make sure that there's an update on that. But in terms of the functional element of that, it would be predominantly outside of the planning remit. But we'll look at those that have outdoor space, particularly in terms of balconies, and talk members through those elements.
I'm conscious that we're starting to talk about having a debate about the planning application, and I've suggested deferral for a proper full debate in a month's time. Those in favour of a deferral of this application for no longer than a month?
That's 15, Chair.
I think that's everybody. Okay, so thank you, Peter, and the training is very, very useful. Martin's a lovely guy. Okay, so let's move on to the next item, which is item 6. And Jackie is to speak to it.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for 34 Thorndale Close. It's for the construction of a detached dwelling with associated parking, bin and cycle storage, demolition of the side projection. You can see the location plan, with the application site outlined in red. And this shows the aerial view. You can see the application site outlined in red, and to either side of it, two detached dwellings. All of these dwellings have wide frontages, and this really makes up the ribbon of the street. Here are some photos of the street scene. The top two photos shows the wide frontage bungalows that are on either side of the street as you enter into Thorndale Close. The middle photo shows the application site. Just wondering if I can... set within spacious surroundings. The bottom left photo shows the large fronted dwellings further down the street, and the bottom right photo shows two smaller fronted dwellings but still within spacious plots and built as a pair. From these photos, I think you can get a feel for the street scene that all the houses are located within spacious plots. This shows the front of the existing dwelling and the rear of the existing dwelling. Photo 3 is taken from the back of the house looking up the garden. This shows the existing and the proposed block plans. You can see the proposal is to demolish the existing double garage shown on the existing block plan and infill the side garden area with the detached dwelling shown in the proposed block plan. You can see the proposed dwelling is orientated in a different way to the existing property and others around it, being narrow in width and extending further to the rear so as to appear cramped on the plot. This shows the proposed floor layout of the two-bedroom detached property. You can see the two car parking spaces will be located to the front of the dwelling, and two additional car parking spaces will be created for the existing dwelling, removing some of the grassed area to the front of the property. This slide shows the proposed elevations, with the black being the existing dwelling and the blue being the proposed dwelling. You can see from the front elevation the narrow width to the front of the proposed new dwelling comparatively to the existing dwelling. You can see the proposed dwelling would have a hipped roof design, but due to the smaller footprint, the ridge height is lower than the ridge height of the existing house, making the pitch of the roof appear squashed in comparison to the existing dwelling, and those around it, making it appear odd and alien within the street scene. You can also see here the small distance between the proposed dwelling and its neighbours, which is not in keeping with the spacious character enjoyed by other dwellings on the street. As detailed in the report, a previous application was approved earlier this year for a side extension on the property, and for completeness, members can see the proposed extension here along with the existing proposal. It should be noted that a similar side extension has been completed further down the street, and this is shown in the next slide. So this slide shows 34 Thorndale Close and 44 Thorndale Close with the large side extension. Although large, it should be noted that side extensions are permissible within the confines of existing dwellings. You can also see that it maintains the large frontages within the street scene, and a different separate development would not be appropriate on the same site. So the application is recommended for refusal as set out in the report.
Thank you. There's alternative wording on the supplementary agenda. Any member? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman, and it's a word of caution, if I may. We had exactly the same situation in View Road in Cliff Woods, of where the existing property was allowed to have an extension, and once the extension was built, then they separated the two properties off. So you then had a terrace of houses built on the same plot. So there's just a word of caution on that one. Thank you. But I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Galvin.
I'm quite happy to support the officer's recommendation on this. Normally, given the huge pressure that we've got, the need to build new homes here in Medway, we've always, I think, given the benefit of the doubt for new builds, and certainly small sites like this have made a contribution to provide more homes here in Medway. But I agree with the officer's thoughts on this. It looks contrived, it's squashed in. At least the extension, whether it's subsequently divided into another property or not, at least it looks connected with the neighbouring property. This proposal does not, and I think all these cases must be treated on their merits because every site will be slightly different. But in this case, I would have no qualms at all but support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Howcroft-Scott.
Yes, thank you for your report and your presentation. I totally agree with you on the visual appearance and that I will be supporting you. Thank you.
Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you. I'm worried about appeals.
Mr. Harris.
Chairman, thank you. As members will know from previous reports on appeals, it's always, there's no guarantee that we will win an appeal or that we will lose an appeal. We do consider very carefully what the chances are on appeal before we make a recommendation. As set out in the officer's report, in favour of the application is our housing land supply, which Peter's also made reference to it. But it's only for one additional dwelling, so it only has a very small impact on that housing land supply. But we feel, and I think Councillor Galvin summed up very well, we think the harm here outweighs the benefit of one additional unit. So we feel we can make a defence of it, but I can't guarantee that it will win an appeal, but I fully support the reason for refusal.
Any other member? Okay. I'm going to the Vice Chair to move the recommendation, and it is on the supplementary agenda, advice sheet.
Cheers, thank you. Right, thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation for refusal as set out in the main report.
Seconded, Chair.
Those in favour of the proposal which is for refusal, as said by the Vice Chair.
That's 15, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Whoops. So the application for 34 Thorndale Close, Horsted, has been refused. We move on to item 7, and Chantal is going to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application seeks full planning permission for the construction of a 2-bedroom bungalow with attached garage, associated parking and garden to front, and is located within the urban area of Hoo. The proposal will result in the subdivision of the existing residential curtilage of 42 Main Road to provide a self-contained dwelling within the side area of the 42 Main Road, and it will be accessed via Coombe Road. These are some photographs of the area. The photographs on the left-hand side of the screen demonstrate long views towards the site from Main Road, with the host property of 42 Main Road being the white rendered property, as you can see here and here. On the right-hand side of the screen shows the proposal site on that corner plot, with its relationship to the bungalows within Coombe Road, and again with the host property of 42 Main Road. The proposal site has been subject to 4 permissions, 2 outline applications for approval for bungalows, but most recently 2 refusals for 2-storey chalet-style bungalows in 2022, which were determined and overturned at Planning Committee. So those are the previous refusals on the screen there. So this application is for a bungalow. These are the elevations of that two-bedroom bungalow, demonstrating the significant improvement from the 2-storey appearance of the previously refused applications, relating more towards the dwellings of Coombe Road and of the previous approvals in 2005 and 2016 for the construction of a detached bungalow within the site. Moving on to the floor plans, this demonstrates the internal layout of the property, comprising of 2 bedrooms, both served by en-suites, an open plan kitchen, dining, living area, together with porch and utility room. This drawing also demonstrates the garden space for occupants, the parking area and garage accessed from Coombe Road. The applicant has provided some 3D images which demonstrate the relatability of the bungalow to the bungalows within Coombe Road and the subservience to the dwelling at 42 Main Road. It is considered the proposal would be acceptable in principle, and this has been established by the 2003 and 2016 approvals in accordance with policy H11 of the local plan. It's not considered that the proposal would result in harm to the character of the area, nor would it result in significant impact on neighbouring amenity, highway safety or highways function, and would overcome concerns raised on previous applications, and as such is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it agreed that Councillor Pearce addresses the committee? Right, so we have a new system, and those at home get to see Councillor Pearce, while those in the room get to see an iPad. And so at the end of 4 minutes, the committee clerk will say 4 minutes, and then we'll go on to the end. Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. The applicant is a resident of mine, and the representations received are mostly from residents, so this isn't an application by a corporate developer. This is likely to be the 3rd approved consent to build on this site, what is typically recognised as a bungalow. The first consent was in 2005, and the second was in 2016. Both permissions have, of course, expired. Proposals for a 2-storey property were rightly refused against the recommendation in 2022 and 2023 by the former Planning Committee. Because the 2016 consent for a bungalow has expired, the applicant is now understandably renewing the consent with this application. It was important the proposals for the 2-storey property were previously refused because Coombe Road is all bungalows in the typical sense. 2 stories would have been out of keeping and out of character for that road, and some neighbouring roads such as Newitt and Killick. But more importantly, committee, the physical impact of the previous proposed 2-storey property on adjacent 42 Main Road would have harmed this locally important and attractive historic building. 42 Main Road is a farmstead building and can be seen on old maps dating as far back as 1862. The property is more than 160 years old and is adjacent to a Grade 2 listed Meadow house, which was built in the mid-1700s. Although 42 Main Road isn't listed, it is notable and a historic property locally and shares several attractive features with its listed neighbour. The application for a bungalow is significant. This application is significantly reduced in scale and impact compared to the 2-storey proposals, and therefore myself and ward councillors believe the development can be made acceptable with conditions. 42 Main Road acts as a white canvas on the street scene, and therefore the proposed use of red brick would make the new property stand out rather than 42 Main Road being the standout property. Therefore, the exterior of the proposal should be white, and this would also match adjacent and nearby properties. I'm happy to see the condition, that condition 5 covers this issue, with the requirement for a materials plan to be submitted. This plan will also cover aspects such as the roof tiles and other features to ensure that the materials used match and do not harm historic 42 Main Road. I'm also very happy to see that condition 11 removes permitted development rights so that visual and neighbouring amenity, particularly with regards to 42 Main Road, is achieved indefinitely. This application has received fewer representations from local residents, and I believe this is due to the proposal once again constituting a bungalow and not a two-storey property. I agree that the proposed dwelling will effectively remove 1 or 2 on-street parking spaces on Coombe Road because of the need for crossover, but the application can't successfully be refused on these grounds alone. Other representations, including from the Parish Council and the Dickens Country Protection Society, have raised concerns about overdevelopment of the site. The previous 2-storey applications certainly were overdevelopment. I thank officers for the proposed conditions, and I thank the applicant for reverting back to the bungalow proposal. The application can be made acceptable with conditions and is supported. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's been previous applications of the sites which were refused by the previous planning committee, and this, I think, starts to address some of those issues. Any member? Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Chair. Unlike the previous application, I think this one is perfectly acceptable. From the 3D streetscape screen I've seen that I've got in front of me, which is just shown up there as well, I think it neatly fits in. And I think it's nice to see actually a bungalow being built. It's a much derided type of property, but given our increasingly elderly population that we've got with the demographic curve, there'll be a lot more people that will need bungalows. I think it's a great shame that in many parts of Medway that bungalows have now been converted into houses, and that opportunity for people in the future with mobility issues and the like to enjoy living in those properties is diminished. So from a personal point of view, that's something I've been banging about for many years. So I'm delighted to see another bungalow. The only thing I will disagree with Ward Councillor on is the idea of painting it white. It's not a conservation area, and I think we'd be setting, I think, an unfortunate precedent if we insisted on what colour people could have their homes. I mean, obviously, garish pink or something would not be acceptable, but I think, I think that brick, and brick is very much a local building material. There were certainly brick fields in that area. It's been a traditional building material here in Medway for generations. So I think the brick is perfectly acceptable. I think to insist on having it painted, which will give future owners then they will be obliged to maintain that over the years, which will come at a cost. So I personally would not be in favour of support of having that restriction on the application. It should only be white. As from that picture in front of us, I think the building looks and the concrete tiles on the roof look perfectly acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
You're back on your favourite subject, Adrian. Yeah. Any other member? Okay, I'm going to move to the Vice Chair. I think it is a great opportunity to finalise this site. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation to approve the application as per conditions 1 to 11 as laid out in the main papers.
Seconded, Chair.
Excellent. Those in favour of the proposal?
That's 15, Chair.
Sorry, it can't be 15.
Sorry?
It can't be 15.
Oh, 14, sorry.
Excellent. Okay, so the application for 42 Main Road Who is being approved. Thank you, Chatham. So we move on to the next item, which is item 8, and that's Scarlet Meadow, Mats Hill, and Hannah is going to speak to it.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application is a retrospective application and is for the construction of a single-storey outbuilding. As set out in the report, this site has planning permission for residential use for a traveller family. They've been on site for a number of years now. There is a restriction via condition on this site, which restricts this site particularly for personal use by the applicant and her immediate family. So this slide here just shows the location of that site within the wider context of Mats Hill Road. This is an aerial photograph of the site. What you can see, if I can get the mouse in the right place, so there's a mobile home, at the time that this was taken, there's a mobile home here, there's a second mobile home here, there's some stables at the rear of the site here with hard standing. These two fields here are effectively paddocks for horses, and then we've got hard standing at the front here, and then this is where the tourers are located when on site here, and there's a building and a shed here which are currently used for washing and some, not all, but some of the day room use facilities currently. This is the proposed layout, albeit a retrospective application. This is a proposed layout, and you can see the location of the day room sited behind the mobile home. This also shows the second mobile home that's located here, which, whilst it has planning consent, on my most recent visit wasn't actually in place on site. But the location of the touring caravans is shown here at the front of the site, near where the main residential access is. So this whole area here is hard standing. And you've got an access that has been laid down to the side, which goes to the stables at the rear. So this plan here shows the elevations of the building. So the front elevation here is what fronts facing the mobile home. It's kind of a bit clearer in the photographs. And you can see there's sort of a main entrance door in. You've got the side elevation here, and you'll note there's sort of a porch overhang at the front. The rear elevation here shows a doorway, and then you've got another side elevation which shows a small doorway here. You'll see at the top here that we've put the square meterage of the building. This size comparable has been put in really for members to better understand the scale of the development. This scheme is shown to be 87.24 square metres, which, for you to better understand, is the equivalent of what we would look at under national housing standards for a 3-bed, 5-person bungalow, so a single-storey structure. This is the floor plan, and again you can see the floor area here. So the main width of the building is just shy of 12 square metres at 11.925 metres, and the depth of the building is 7.3 metres. So you can see the main entrance here centrally, which I say fronts the mobile home, the second rear access here, and then you've got the side access. You'll note from this plan, that there currently isn't any internal layout indicated. That's because currently the building is in the process of being finished, and that has not been formulated. I'll move on to some pictures of the scheme. So these are some sort of wider photos of the site, taken mainly from the front. But you can see this larger photograph here is taken just across the fence. You can see the tourers that are in the corner in situ here, so it's taken from the corner. You can see the mobile home that's in situ currently, and then we have the application subject of this retrospective the application building subject to this retrospective application just behind. And again, these two shots here taken sort of from the main vehicular entrance into the site, and you can see the roof of the retrospective structure located, and you'll see from this photograph when it was taken, the second mobile home isn't actually in situ currently, but the smaller buildings that are being used, the smaller outbuilding and the shed that are currently being used for some of the day room purposes just there inside. So these applications show the side elevations of the building and the relationship to the mobile structure currently. So what we can see, obviously, the main access to the structure is sited here, and we've got the porch element abutting the mobile home. So the canopy or porch, whilst it does sort of come up very close to the mobile home, there's no access or link through from the mobile home, so this remains separate, and you would have to come round the side of the structure to get in the main front entrance. These are quite clearly indicated, so you can see the east and the front corner of the property here, so just seeing the windows, and again you can see then the east and rear elevation with the rear door at the top. So eastern part of the rear elevation, so these are just moving around the building, and then we've got the west elevation showing the side access. These internal shots show the unfinished building as it currently stands. I suppose just to indicate, there's a point here which is where the plumbing will be, but in terms of internal walls and layout, that isn't in place currently. So this slide has recently been added just to demonstrate, so we've gone right back to the beginning basically. So the first application on this site was made in 2016. This was a retrospective application for the change of use of the land for the residential siting of a mobile home, along with 2 touring caravans, cesspit, hard standing, and the construction of a day room with paddocks to the rear and the construction of some boundary fencing. So it isn't massively clear from here, but you can see that there was a day room structure proposed here, and then the mobile home was sited here with the hard standing, and which allowed for the siting of the touring caravans here. So this was the original 2016 consent. This elevational treatment here was the proposed day room, so you can see from its appearance it was almost quite stable-like in structure, and it equated to 43.92 square metres. So following on from that, we then had a later application in 2020. So this application was for the siting of an additional mobile home and a day room. So as you can see from the layout here, so the original mobile home was sited on the side, on the west elevation, for want of a better term. Then the day room was proposed adjacent to that, and then there was an additional mobile home at the back. You can see where the touring caravans were proposed to be sited at that point. And then at the front here was a stable building. Now going forward, what we'll note actually from the aerial photographs, the stables have actually been located at the rear, where the paddocks are, which is far more sensible. So that effectively would never be coming forward. So this application superseded the previous one and saw the day room being located adjacent to the mobile home and 2 mobile homes being sited on site there. And as you can see from the elevational treatment of that approved day room, it was relatively small in scale. It was 42.69 square metres, and there's an internal layout diagram there showing that there would be a living room, dining room space with a separate bathroom and a separate utility room area. I think what I want to note, from these 2 here, is that it's set out within the design section in the officer report, where it states that the amenity buildings that are sited on traveller sites should meet certain criteria. It is set out within the designing gypsy traveller sites in the good practice guide. So this includes ensuring that there's provision of hot and cold water, separate toilet, kitchen, dining, living space, with storage, which is available for cleaning materials and washing facilities. So these previous two applications that have been put in place were both considered to meet that accommodation need, and they could be done suitably within that space. So moving on to the next application, which was a refusal. This was in 2021. This was for a day room which equated as a comparable to a 6-bed, 8-person single-storey unit of accommodation. I appreciate that the application was for a day room and not a unit of accommodation. I want to emphasise that that square meterage has been put in, and that house standard has been put in order to help members understand the equivalent size and a comparable size. So what we can see in this particular application was that there was a front door entrance in the centre, 3 rear door accesses at the rear, and we had 3 study rooms within this development, a living room area, separate kitchen, separate bathroom, separate toilet, with chimney, and it looks quite residential in its appearance when compared to the previous 2 outbuildings that have been approved. Following that refusal, this next application came in 2022, scaled down from the previous 2021 application, but again was considered quite large in scale. So scaled down from 126 square metres to 109. Equivalency again as a comparable to a 4-bedroom, 7-person single-storey unit. We can see here that the design has been modified, the chimney aspect has been removed, but in terms of its general appearance, still relatively residential in its form. So just to bring you back to the current proposal, now that you've seen sort of the history of the site, the current proposal is for the retrospective application for a day room outbuilding which equates to just over 87 square metres. Whilst the council fully support the provision of a day room within this site, overall, in terms of the size, scale and location of this day room, it hasn't been considered to be appropriate and is out of keeping and detrimental within the AONB and the wider area. So as set out within the report, the recommendation in this particular instance is for refusal on the grounds as set out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on from the report, and thank you very much for that, I think it's pretty obvious that the current residents on this site have contrived over the years to make something of this site for which it was never originally intended. From the very first retrospective planning application, they've continued down that line for day rooms, stables, additional residential places, which this council or this planning committee has bent over backwards to accommodate them. So I have real concerns with this, and I fully support the recommendation for refusal. My concern is how are we going to enforce that recommendation and make sure that building is removed? Thank you.
Any other member? Mr. Harris, just been enforcement, it will go forward to enforcement.
Chairman, absolutely. If this committee ratifies the recommendation for refusal, it's a retrospective application. You're authorising us to take enforcement action, which we will do.
Any other member? If not, I'll go to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation for refusal as set out in the main papers.
Those in favour of those in favour of the proposal. Those against?
That's 14, Chair. That's 1.
Okay, thank you. The application for Scarlet, Meadow, Mats Hill, Rainham has been refused. Thank you, Hannah. And we'll move on to the next item, which is item 9, and Mary will speak to it.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a 2-storey side extension which is for two purposes. It creates an internal stairwell and access for the existing flats, and then a three-bedroom dwelling on the side that includes the demolition of an existing garage and provision of cycle parking. I'm going to go the wrong way. No, it's that way. Sorry. You can see the site outlined in red. It's at the end of the sort of close of Cedar Road. Oh, I go the wrong way. Sorry, I haven't quite got used to that. Thank you. These are the street views. The site is at the very end. You can see it's just here, the site. So it's the left-hand one of the right-hand pair. Those two sort of sets of houses that you can see in the bottom photograph are actually flats. So there's a flat on the ground floor and a flat on the first floor. And each pair of flats looks like a semi-detached pair of dwellings. So which way is it now? Okay, thank you. So these are the photographs of the site. You can see the frontage in the top left, and then the side and rear garden in the other photos. And you can see again that the site is actually two flats rather than a semi-detached pair. There's a history of applications on this site, so I'm just going to quickly run through what's happened before. There was a scheme in 2017 for 4 flats, and I think you can see there it goes right to the site boundary at the side of the plot. It's the number of sort of flat roof dormers at the back, and it was refused for 2 reasons. It was firstly refused for the visual impact on the poor design. I think that's quite evident. And then it was secondly refused for overdevelopment detrimental to residential amenity. They appealed the decision, and the inspector agreed with the first reason, the poor design, but he didn't agree with the second reason and concluded that the activity levels and the traffic generation of the 4 flats would not have an adverse impact on the surrounding area. And that's relevant to when we come on to consider the current application. So you can see the 4 parking spaces in the frontage there. The next scheme was approved. It was an application for 1 unit, basically a 2-bedroomed house and an extension at the side. You can see there it included the enclosure of the external staircase to the first floor flat, which is what's currently proposed as well, and then the 2-storey side extension for a dwelling. It's obviously still a large extension to the side, but it doesn't curve right round to the boundary. The next application was more recent, and that was for 2 flats, so 1 on the first floor and 1 on the ground floor. It includes again the enclosure of the staircase for the existing flats, and it was refused for 2 reasons. Firstly, there was an overdevelopment of 2 2-bedroom flats, and that the design was quite contrived and out of character. It was quite a mishmash of different features, adding sort of quite a complex extensions to the property. It was refused for tandem parking. If you see on the side here, you've got the 2 spaces for the existing flats as they're already there, and then you've got 2 spaces for what was proposed to be 2 flats. So 1 flat space was behind the other space, and obviously that doesn't really work. And then the third reason for refusal on that was that they didn't pay the bird mitigation money. Then we move on to the current scheme, which is for 1 house. So it's a reduced scheme from the previous refusal, but more interesting design than the previous approval, which I think if you remember, it was a very straight extension to the side. They've reduced the bulk in the middle with the access to the first floor of the flats, and the design's sort of relatively simple. Oh, I've just skipped a plan, I think. Oh, no, sorry. There's the layout. Again, it shows the internal stairwell, and then it gives the first floor flat access to the rear garden, and then the 2-storey dwelling to the side. The layout now works. You've got the 2 spaces for the proposed house. So although they're still tandem spaces, if they're for the same occupants, then that works. It's quite a standard arrangement, not ideal, but standard. There's room for cycle storage at the back and for bin storage. The bird mitigation's been paid, and in these circumstances, as set out in the report, approval's recommended.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chair, I'm obviously familiar with the site. It's in the ward I represent. It's a difficult one because, as the report says, it's a balanced judgment. But that seems to be, unless officers correct my understanding, that seems to be a balanced judgment on the basis of the design. As the officer said, the highway issues didn't seem to figure with the inspector in terms of the fact he or she didn't think that they were grounds for refusal. But I would make the general observation that I'm pursuing, or I'm about to pursue with highways, some of the parking and traffic issues in that general area, particularly further down close to junctions. And as we improve the parking restrictions at junctions, of course, more traffic will be parked up further near the development site. So whilst I don't have a planning ground to argue for refusal of the application, I would just be interested to hear a little bit more from the Chief Planning Officer or the officer concerned about what they mean by a balance judgment, and is that purely in terms of the design of the building. Thank you, Chair.
Mary? Yep.
Yeah, the balance is really on the design. I think, as you say, the inspector last time wasn't worried about parking. So, and the last scheme, the scheme that the inspector determined, I think there were 6 parking spaces because there were actually 2 in the back garden. But that was, yeah, this provides a better proportion, a better number of spaces because it's just a single dwelling. So, yeah, it's a balance on the design. It's quite a large extension, but it's, in my view, better than the one we approved. So that's the balance, yeah.
Any other member? Okay. I move to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation for approval subject to conditions 1 to 12 as laid out in the main papers.
Seconded.
Those in favour of the proposal?
That's 15, Chair.
So the recommendation is for approval. So we have approved 152 Cedar Road, Strood. And that is the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.